Karen Reid. What is she? Karen Reid was accused of the murder of her boyfriend, Boston police officer John O. Keefe. She was accused of hitting him with her SUV and leaving him to die. Her first trial, which started in April 2024 at Norfolk Superior Court in Dedham, ended months later in a mistrial due to a starkly divided hung jury. Her second trial began on April 1st, 2025. Deliberations began on June 13th, 2025, and she was recently found not guilty of the most serious charges in her high-profile Massachusetts murder retrial. In their fourth day of deliberations, juries acquitted Reid of second-degree murder and manslaughter in the death of her boyfriend. She was convicted of driving under the influence of alcohol. This outcome has divided people, and it provides us with an excellent opportunity to consider her behaviour, to make a determination as to what she is. Let us begin by looking at the timeline of events. On January the 29th, 2022, shortly after midnight, Karen Reid, John O. Keefe, and a group of friends went to the Waterfall Bar and Grill in Canton. According to prosecutors, Reid consumed several alcoholic beverages. Reid then drove O'Keefe to the home of Boston police officer Brian Albert. That is where police said people from the bar were meeting back up. The fact that she drove whilst under the influence of alcohol certainly demonstrates a sense of entitlement and a callousness, a lack of regard for the safety of others. 1 a.m. court documents later revealed that in the weeks before and even the hours leading up to the night out, text messages between Reid and O'Keefe, as well as voicemails, showed a strained relationship. Investigators said that around 1 a.m. on January the 29th, Reid allegedly left O'Keefe a voicemail that said, "You are a fucking loser, fuck yourself. And John, I fucking hate you." That's clearly an insult, which is a rudimentary manipulative behaviour. Viewed in isolation, it might be the response of someone to a provocation, or the diminution of their emotional empathy as a consequence of the fact that somebody has been abusive or unpleasant towards them. Or it could perhaps be the response of a narcissist who has perceived a threat to control and has responded in a provocative manner with insults, showing a sense of entitlement and a haughty disregard towards that individual. Between 4 and 5 a.m., at 4:23 a.m., while heavy snow was falling, O'Keefe's niece called Jennifer McCabe, Brian Albert's sister-in-law and a friend of O'Keefe's. She said Reid was distraught because O'Keefe had not come home and was not answering his cell phone. According to court documents, McCabe said she heard Reid screaming, "John didn't come home, we had a fight." Again, note the argumentativeness. Around 5 a.m., Reid called another woman whose husband was friends with O'Keefe. Prosecutors alleged that Reid said while they searched, "What if he's dead? What if a plough hit him? I don't remember anything from last night. We drank so much. I don't remember anything." At 5:07 a.m., Reid, McCabe and the third woman went to look for O'Keefe. Prosecutors said Reid mentioned to the women that she had a crack in her tail light and wondered if she could have hit O'Keefe. At 5:07 a.m., a surveillance camera at O'Keefe's house showed Reid's SUV coming extremely close to O'Keefe's SUV in the driveway. Prosecutors say no tail light pieces were found in the driveway. Reid's defence argued the vehicle did strike the SUV, breaking the tail light and providing an explanation for damage to the SUV. Around 6 a.m., Reid sees O'Keefe lying in the snow outside Brian Albert's home. An emergency responder said that while hysterical and inconsolable, Reid repeatedly says, "I hit him, I hit him." The defence argued that one of the first responding officers from Canton Police gave false and deceptive testimony to the grand jury that would later indict Reid. Prosecutors and defence attorneys agree that at some point in the morning O Keefe was killed. Someone Googled Hoss, sick, long to dying cold. The sides disagree on when the search was made. Prosecutors say the search happened at 6:23 a.m. and 6:24 a.m. after O Keefe's body was found. The defence say a federal forensic expert determined the search was made at 2:27 a.m. before police were alerted that O Keefe's body had been found. On January the 29th, 2022, police say they found a broken cocktail glass and pieces of taillight at the scene. A forensic toxicologist estimated that Reed's blood alcohol content would have been around 0.13 to 0.29 around 12:45 a.m., which is more than the legal limit. On January the 31st, 2022, an autopsy is completed on O Keefe. Prosecutors said the medical examiner ruled the cause of death was blunt impact injuries to the head and hypothermia. They say the medical examiner did not find any obvious signs of an altercation or a fight. On the 2nd of February 2022, Reed was arrested and appears in Stoughton District Court for the first time, pleading not guilty to manslaughter, motor vehicle homicide, and leaving the scene of a motor vehicle collision causing death. This might have been because she was innocent, or this might have been the initial denial of a narcissist to a threat to control. On the 10th of June 2022, a Norfolk County grand jury indicts Karen Reed on charges of second-degree murder, manslaughter while operating under the influence of alcohol, and leaving the scene of personal injury and death. Reed is arraigned on the new charges in O Keefe's death. She pleaded not guilty in Norfolk Superior Court in Dedham and was ordered held on $100,000 bail. Reed made bail and was released. May the 3rd, 2023, defence attorneys Alan Jackson and David Yannetti alleged that O Keefe was involved in a fight inside Brian Albert's home. They claim O Keefe was beaten and his body was later dumped outside. Jackson and Yannetti focused on wounds to O Keefe's arms, which they said showed he was attacked by Albert's dog during the fight. This is not just fishing, Jackson said during the May 3rd hearing. We've got a fish on the hook. We just need the court to help us to reel it in. Norfolk Assistant District Attorney Adam Lally argued that O Keefe never went in the home and added, "There's no evidence that Mr. O Keefe was beaten and left for dead." On May the 24th, 2023, during a pre-trial hearing, Reed's attorneys laid out what they alleged to be a cover-up by law enforcement. Certainly, the Massachusetts State Police is involved. There are people that were in that house that are involved, Jackson said. Brian Albert is involved. Jennifer McCabe is involved. The rest of the folks that were in that house, there's some level of involvement by every one of them. Every single one of them. We're not going to rest until we get to the bottom of exactly who is behind this cover-up. Not only Karen Reed deserves this, John O Keefe deserves this, and has deserved this from moment one. And that's why we're not going to rest. Following the dramatic hearing, Reed spoke to reporters for the first time. "We know who did it. We know, and we know who spearheaded this cover-up. You all know," Reed said on the courthouse steps. "I tried to save his life. I tried to save his life at 6 a.m. I was covered in his blood. I was the only one trying to save his life." Are those the protestations of an innocent individual that sought to save her boyfriend? Or is this the grandiose blame-shifting of a narcissist maintaining that other people were responsible for the death to avoid accountability on her part? On August the 1st, 2023, Judge Beverly Cannoni denied a prosecution request for a gag order in the case. The Norfolk District Attorney's Office had asked for the gag order, saying witnesses were being harassed. Yannetti countered by saying it was prosecutors who are controlling the narrative. On the 25th of August 2023, Norfolk County District Attorney Michael Morrissey released a video statement slamming what he called absolutely baseless harassment of witnesses in the case. "Conspiracy theories are not evidence," Morrissey said. The idea that multiple police departments, EMTs, fire personnel, the medical examiner, and the prosecuting agency are joined in or taken in by a vast conspiracy should be seen for what it is. Completely contrary to the evidence and a desperate attempt to reassign guilt. Was this observation correct? Was this an instance of the paranoia of a narcissist suggesting that there's some form of conspiracy involving multiple agencies in a desperate attempt to avoid accountability? Or as the individual simply telling the truth? On October the 11th, 2023, Aidan Kearney, the blogger who operates the site Turtle Boy News, was arrested on charges of witness intimidation related to the Karen Read case. Kearney had been covering the case for months, often recording himself confronting witnesses. His defense attorney told the judge that Kearney was exercising his First Amendment right. On December the 26th, 2023, a judge revoked Kearney's bail amid new assault and battery charges. Kearney allegedly went to his ex-girlfriend's home, demanded to see her phone, then shoved her during a confrontation. Kearney remained in jail for nearly 2 months, but was later released on personal recognizance. On February the 22nd, 2024, in court filings, prosecutors said that they had DNA evidence recovered from a broken tail light that implicates Read in O'Keefe's death. They said the tail light is the same material from Read's SUV and that the DNA matched O'Keefe's. They also said that broken tail light material was found on O'Keefe's clothing. 12th of March 2024, Read's defense team said that a federal investigation into the case led to an FBI expert concluding that evidence does not support the theory that O'Keefe died after being hit by an SUV. The damage on the car was inconsistent with having made contact with John O'Keefe's body. In other words, the car did not hit him, and he was not hit by the car. Prosecutors disagreed. March the 13th, 2024, in a brief statement, Massachusetts State Police said they'd opened an internal investigation into a potential violation of department policy by Trooper Michael Proctor, who was the lead investigator in the case. Police did not say what prompted the investigation, but said he remains on full duty. Read's defense attorneys said the federal investigation showed Proctor hid personal ties to people involved in the case. In a statement, Proctor's attorney, Michael DiStefano, denied any wrongdoing. Trooper Proctor has been fully cooperative in responding to the investigations conducted by the U.S. Attorney's Office and the Massachusetts State Police Internal Affairs Unit, DiStefano said. To be clear, Trooper Proctor remains steadfast in the integrity of the work he performed investigating the death of Mr. John O. Keefe. To the extent that Trooper Proctor's personal text messages are alluded to in court proceedings regarding Miss Read, he respectfully submits that the objective investigative steps he and members of this unit took are in no way undermined by the content of the personal messages. 26th of March 2024, Judge Cannoni denied a defence motion to dismiss the case. Cannoni said she was denying the motion due to extensive evidence supporting the indictments. April the 12th, 2024, during the final pre-trial hearing in the case, Cannoni heard 30 different motions on which she had to rule, listening to arguments from both sides on many of them. Among them was an argument by Read's attorneys that they should be able to make a third-party culprit defence during the trial. They say Brian Albert, Colin Albert and Brian Higgins, all of whom were present at the party John O'Keefe was at the night he died, could have killed O'Keefe. Again, is this an innocent individual pointing out the truth of what had occurred, or blame-shifting? And might it be the blame-shifting of a narcissist? Prosecutor Lally called this a fanciful story and told the judge there's actually no evidence. 16th of April 2024, Karen Read's second-degree murder trial began with jury selection. A total of 4 jurors were added on the first day. April the 17th, jury selection continued for a second day, with 7 more jurors added. April 17th, 2024, a third day of jury selection wrapped with a full jury seated. April 2024, April the 24th, 2024, a jury was seated on the 5th day of jury selection over the course of more than a week. April 29th, 2024, opening statements and testimony got underway with the first witnesses called. John O'Keefe's brother Paul and his wife Erin were the first two on the stand. Canton Police Officer Steve Seraf also began his testimony. Prosecutors showed video from Seraf's dashboard camera as he arrived on scene. 30th of April 2024, a Canton paramedic who treated John O'Keefe the day he died testified that he heard a woman saying, "I hit him, I hit him." Reed's defence team argued that the man's testimony has changed over time. 2nd of May 2024, 4 paramedics and firefighters testified about what they heard Reed say the morning O'Keefe's body was found. 6th of May 2024, jurors heard the 911 calls from the day O'Keefe's body was found. Police who responded to the scene testified as well on the 5th day of testimony. May the 7th, 2024, several Canton police officers testified about their handling of the crime scene. Among them was Sergeant Michael Lank, who Reed's defence team argued had personal connections to the home where John O'Keefe's body was found in 2022. May 10th, 2024, there was a pause in the trial as Judge Cannoni heard arguments about whether Aidan Kearney, who publishes as Turtle Boy for his site TB Daily News, should be allowed in the courtroom. He was facing charges of witness intimidation involving people in the Reed case. The judge ruled that Kearney must leave the courtroom when certain witnesses take the stand. Also that day, retired Boston police officer Brian Albert took the stand. He owned the home where O'Keefe's body was found. He testified that O'Keefe and Reed never entered his home the night of the incident. May 14th, a woman who was at Brian Albert's Fairview Road home the night O'Keefe died said she saw a black blob in the lawn as she was leaving. The defence called it a made-up story. May 15th, Ali McCabe, a prosecution witness, broke down in tears on the stand describing harassment in the case. Colin Albert, who the defence claims could have been involved in the fight that killed O'Keefe, was also called as a witness. May 16th, Colin Albert finishes his testimony with cross-examination that focused on what defence attorneys claim is a history of violent behaviour. May 17th, Jennifer McCabe, a key witness in the case, took the stand. She was with Reed the morning O'Keefe's body was found. McCabe testified that Reed asked her to Google how long it would take someone to die in the cold. Defence attorneys argue the search actually happened before O'Keefe's body was found. Court ended for the day before Reed's attorneys began to cross-examine McCabe. May 21st, Jennifer McCabe was back on the stand, this time for several hours of contentious cross-examination by Alan Jackson. This day marked the first time Kearney's Turtle Boy site had been directly referenced. Jennifer McCabe said defence attorney Alan Jackson had put the information out on social media, but Jackson said he had not. "I'm sorry, Turtle Boy did," the witness responded. Earlier in the day, Jennifer McCabe referred to Kearney as some named blogger that I think the defence is very familiar with. May 24, Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms and Explosive agent Brian Higgins was on the stand. Prosecutors presented flirty text messages he and Reed shared in the weeks leading up to O'Keefe's death. Innocent flirtation? Or is this the behaviour of an individual that sees herself as entitled to flirt with somebody who is not her boyfriend whilst in a relationship? Defence attorneys have said that Higgins is one of the 3 men they claim could have been responsible for killing O'Keefe during a fight. May 28th, Higgins completed his testimony. Other witnesses were called, including O'Keefe's niece and nephew. They testified about a strained relationship between Reed and O'Keefe. Might this be a relationship that it was an abusive one that potentially involved one or possibly 2 narcissists? 3rd of June, testimony focused on broken taillight pieces that were found at the scene of O'Keefe's death. June 5th, several videos were played that prosecutors say showing Reed drinking numerous cocktails in the hours before O'Keefe died. They also focused on what they say was a broken taillight in Reed's SUV. June the 6th, defence attorney Alan Jackson told reporters that Massachusetts State Police Trooper Michael Proctor, who Reed's attorneys have tried to show could have planted evidence to help friends who were witnesses in the case, will take the stand as a witness for the prosecution. There had been uncertainty when and how Proctor would testify, as he was listed on the defence and prosecution's witness lists. Proctor is currently under investigation by Massachusetts State Police for his conduct in the case. The same day as Jackson's comments, Judge Beverly Cannoni told jurors, "I can safely say that you will get this case for your deliberation sometime in the last week in June." 10th of June, Cannoni heard arguments from both sides without the jury present about the prosecution's motion to exclude testimony from a witness who was expected to testify that scratches on O'Keefe's arm were consistent with injuries from a dog attack. Trooper Proctor also took the stand that day, reading derogatory text messages he sent to friends and colleagues about Reed while investigating the case. June 12th, Proctor completed tense cross-examination and stepped down from the witness stand. During his testimony, Proctor was grilled over a text message he sent about Reed saying, "Hopefully she kills herself." June 14th, testimony focused on Reed's SUV travelling in reverse the night of O'Keefe's death, as well as the time of when Jennifer McCabe searched on Google how long it would take a person to die in the cold. 20th of June, prosecutors played angry voicemails that Reed left for O'Keefe not long after prosecutors say she hit and killed him. Is this demonstrative, perhaps, of ignited fury? June 21st, the prosecution rested its case. Defence attorneys began calling witnesses. June 24th, defence rested its case after calling its final 3 witnesses. June 25th, the attorneys presented closing arguments and jurors began deliberating. June 26th, day 2 of jury deliberations ended without a verdict after 7 hours. While jurors deliberated, Reed's attorneys questioned the verdict slip, leading to a tense moment with Judge Beverly Cannoni. June 28th, jurors sent a note to Judge Cannoni telling her they are deadlocked. The judge responded that she did not believe they had deliberated long enough and asked them to continue trying to reach a verdict. July 1st, the jury sent another note to Judge Cannoni for a second time, telling her that they are unable to reach a unanimous verdict. The jury said they are deeply divided, and Cannoni asked them to return for one final round of deliberations. Later in the day, a mistrial was declared due to the hung jury. Hours after the mistrial was declared, Massachusetts State Police announced that Trooper Michael Proctor, the lead investigator in the case, has been relieved of duty. July the 8th, Reed's defence attorneys filed a motion to dismiss for 2 charges. In the filing, they claimed the jury unanimously agreed that Reed was not guilty on those accounts, while being deadlocked on a 3rd charge. July 8th, Michael Proctor was suspended without pay following a duty hearing. July the 9th, the Board of Selectmen announced that Canton Police Officer Kevin Albert was put on leave relating to Proctor's testimony during the trial. July 10th, in a new court filing, Reed's attorneys say another juror told them there was a unanimous agreement that Reed was not guilty on 2 counts. July 12th, prosecutors fired back at the defence's attempt to get 2 of the 3 charges against Reed dismissed, saying she consented to the mistrial. July 18th, an unnamed juror in the case said in a court filing that they fear for their safety. It's unclear where this fear, however, is coming from. It is not stated where this supposed intimidation is being generated from. July 22nd, an anonymous juror tells WBZ-TV that the jury didn't know how to communicate to the judge that they had unanimously agreed to acquit Reed of 2 charges. Judge Cannoni sets a new trial date for January 27th, 2025. August 9th, the case returned to court for a dismissal hearing, as the defence tried to convince the judge to throw out 2 charges against Reed. Judge Beverly Cannoni took arguments under consideration, but did not make a ruling. August the 23rd, Judge Cannoni rejects Karen Reed's attempt to get 2 of the charges against her dismissed. Reed's attorneys plan to appeal. September the 11th, Karen Reed's legal team files an appeal to the Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court. September the 12th, Canton Police Officer Kevin Albert, the brother of Brian Albert, is back on the job after being placed on leave during the trial. September the 23rd, discipline was announced for 2 people connected to the Karen Reed investigation. Canton Police Detective Kevin Albert was suspended without pay for 3 8-hour shifts. An investigation found that the detective, whose brother Brian Albert owned the home where John O'Keefe's body was found, behaved in a way that was unbecoming of a police officer and violated department policies about alcohol consumption or possession on the job. October the 18th, prosecutors seek phone records from Karen Reid's father. When her second trial begins, prosecutors plan to call William Reid as a witness. 28th of October, lawyers for Karen Reid want a wrongful death lawsuit against her to be delayed until after her second criminal trial, an issue that they argued before Judge William White, Jr. in Plymouth Superior Court in Brockton. October the 29th, Vanity Fair releases the first part of its highly anticipated Karen Reid interview. She told the magazine she owes at least $5 million in legal fees. October the 30th, the second part of Vanity Fair's interview with Karen Reid is released. She responds to criticism from the O'Keefe family, including directly responding to quotes from Paul O'Keefe's interview with WBZ-TV. Is it the case with Karen Reid going to Vanity Fair that this is a consequence of an innocent individual requiring vindication by telling her side of the story through the media and explaining how the trial has impacted upon her? Or is this an individual seeking to control the narrative by speaking to a magazine? November the 1st, the judge overseeing the wrongful death lawsuit against Karen Reid rules that she will not have to be deposed in the civil case until after her second criminal trial is over. 4th of November, the prosecution and defence teams file a motion in court calling for Reid's second criminal trial that was due to start on the 27th of January to be postponed until April the 1st. 6th of November, Reid's attempt to get some criminal charges against her thrown out on the grounds of double jeopardy came before the Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court. Attorneys for both sides made their case during the hearing. November 26th, 2024, during an evidentiary hearing, prosecutors asked the judge to allow them to obtain phone records for Karen Reid's parents. The defence called the request a fishing expedition. 29th of November, Judge Cannoni rejects the prosecution's request for the phone records of Karen Reid's parents. 3rd of December, prosecutors asked Judge Cannoni to keep expert testimony about an alleged dog attack out of Karen Reid's second trial. 5th of December, Judge Beverly Cannoni approved a request from prosecutors to get access to unedited and off-the-record recordings from interviews with Karen Reid and her family. December the 9th, the judge approves the joint motion by the defence and prosecution to delay the start of Karen Reid's second trial. 30th of December, former Canton Police Chief Ken Berkowitz, who alerted Massachusetts State Police to tail light evidence during the investigation, died. January the 2nd, 2025, prosecutors asked to exclude testimony from defence expert Richard Green surrounding Jen McCabe's How Long to Die in Cold Google search. January the 23rd, Karen Reid's legal team wants the state to pay for travel expenses for one of her defence experts. Reid's attorneys say that the Canton Police Department did not preserve video footage, but that was not disclosed. As a result, they say their expert wasted his time. 29th of January 2025, John O'Keefe's family provided a statement to WBZ-TV as they marked 3 years since his death. It has been 3 years since Johnny was senselessly taken from us. The void in our lives grows with each passing day, week, month, and year. His absence is profound, and we will continue to seek justice for him. He is always in our hearts, the O'Keefe family said. 12th of February, among over a dozen new filings in the case, was a request by the defence for unredacted documents from the investigation into the death of Sandra Birchmore. February 18th, Judge Cannoni abruptly halted a hearing in the case after the prosecution raised concerns about defence attorneys' conversations with a crash reconstruction expert hired by the federal government. 24th of February, a person briefed on the situation tells WBZ it is expected to be announced at Karen Reid's February the 25th hearing that a federal investigation into the death of John O'Keefe and by association Karen Reid's case has ended and that no charges will be filed. 25th February, at a tense hearing, Karen Reid's attorneys defended their communications with a witness in the first trial. Karen Reid's defence alleges misdirections by the prosecution. 25th of February, following the hearing, supporters greeted Reid with flowers outside the courtroom on her 45th birthday. 28th of February, Karen Reid's defence files a motion to dismiss her entire case for reasons of extraordinary governmental misconduct. 5th of March, the case was the subject of 2 hearings in separate courthouses. Karen Reid appealed a recent decision by the Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court at Federal Court in South Boston. Reid and her attorneys then headed to Norfolk Superior Court in Dedham, where her defence argued its recently filed motion to dismiss. March 13th, a federal judge denied Reid's request to drop 2 charges against her, saying Judge Cannoni was not wrong in declaring a mistrial. Now, in respect of all of these repeated court applications, is this as a consequence of an innocent individual who is facing a conspiracy against her, or is it potentially the paranoia of a narcissist who, unable to accept that she has done wrong, believes that there is some kind of conspiracy against her? Remember, it is common for a narcissist, as a consequence of the way that their narcissism operates, to not only deny that they've done anything wrong, but to honestly believe that they have been set up, that they have been framed. By virtue of delusion and compartmentalization, the narcissism rewrites history, telling them that they are innocent and that the problem doesn't lie with them, but with a concerted campaign in respect of proving that they are at fault when they're not. This is why many narcissists accuse people of using flying monkeys against them, and why I would encourage you to obtain from the Knowledge Vault the truth about flying monkeys to help you understand more about the mindset of the narcissist, who is completely incapable of being able to accept that they are at fault because they are blinded by the narcissism, and instead what they then face is the narcissism telling them they are innocent, they are not at fault, it must be somebody else's fault, they are conspiring against them, they are looking to cause a problem in respect of them. March 20th, for the first time, Reid and Aidan Kearney, the blogger who writes under the name Turtle Boy, appeared during a hearing together. Prosecutors are seeking messages between the two, which Reid and her attorneys object to. 21st of March, Karen Reid's attorneys ask a federal judge to delay the start of her next trial after the request was rejected the day before by Judge Beverly Cannoni. The federal judge denied Reid's request. It's also noteworthy that often narcissists, as an attempt to assert control and nullify threat to control, will seek adjournments, continuances, and seek to delay the provision of material, information, documentation, the start of trials. March 24th, prosecutors are seeking messages between Karen Reid and her defence attorney, David Yannetti, in the days following O Keefe's death. March 25th, as expected, Judge Beverly Cannoni rejected the request for text messages between Reid and Yannetti during the final pretrial hearing. March 25th, Judge Cannoni denied Karen Reid's motion to dismiss the entire case against her, setting the stage for her second high-profile trial to get underway. 27th of March, Karen Reid's motion to stay state court proceedings pending appeal is denied by First Circuit Court of Appeals. The court affirmed the lower federal court's decision. March 31st, the defence will not be allowed to blame Colin Albert for John O'Keefe's death, Judge Beverly Cannoni ruled. 1st of April 2025, Karen Reid's second trial officially got underway with jury selection. 7th of April, Karen Reid is asking the US Supreme Court to delay her state trial while they decide if they will take up her appeal. 9th of April, Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson of the US Supreme Court denied Karen Reid's request to pause her trial. The Supreme Court will review whether to take the case on the 25th of April. April 13th, a federal judge ruled against Reid's supporters who wanted to be able to protest closer to the courthouse ahead of her second trial, saying the buffer zone does not violate their constitutional rights. April 16th, the final motion hearing before the start of the trial was held. Arguments were heard over topics that included federal ARCCA witnesses. Aidan Turtleboy Kearney also said, through his attorney, that he would plead the Fifth Amendment if called as a witness, and prosecutors agreed not to call him. 22nd of April, attorneys gave opening statements. First two witnesses were also called. April 23rd, John O'Keefe's mother, Peggy O'Keefe, took the stand. It was the first time she's spoken out publicly since her son's death. April 24th, text messages between Karen Reid and John O'Keefe in the hours leading up to his death were read on the third day of trial. The content of the text message makes interesting reading. The first messages read were from January the 28th, 2022, hours before prosecutors alleged that Reid hit O'Keefe with her SUV. "Tell me if you're interested in someone else. Can't think of any other reason you've been like this," Reid writes. "Nope," O'Keefe replies, adding another message. "Things haven't been great between us for a while. Ever consider that? Sick of always arguing and fighting. It's been weekly for several months now. So yeah, I'm not as quick to jump back into being lovey-dovey as you apparently," O'Keefe writes. Reid calls O'Keefe several times as the text conversation is going on, but he rejects the calls. "OMG, stop calling," O'Keefe wrote, later rejecting another call and saying, "I'm not answering. Stop calling." Is this simply the behaviour of someone that's having an argument, quite possibly exacerbated by the consumption of alcohol? Or is it the behaviour of someone who needs control, who is paranoid that her partner is cheating, or is correct that he's cheating, and either way, through paranoia or actual genuine belief, has a threat to their need for control, resulting in repeated hoovering of her boyfriend by sending text messages and calling again and again and again? Or is it simple agitation exacerbated by drink? Eventually, they speak on the phone for just under 5 minutes. The text messages continue, and Reid continuously tries to get O'Keefe to meet her for drinks. "You're like jonesing to drink, so go," O'Keefe said in the afternoon. "Was hoping after this morning you'd be interested in smoothing things over with me," Reid said around 6:30 p.m. Just after 7:15 p.m, O'Keefe says he and his friend Mike Camerano are headed out and asks if she plans to join them. They settle on heading to C.F. McCarthy's in Canton. "We're taking Mike's car, so I'm relying on you for a ride home if he leaves," O'Keefe wrote. "I'll head up there in a few min. Let me know if you leave," Reid writes at 8:35 p.m. Guarino, who is a state police trooper, stepped down from the stand after reading the text messages. On the 28th of April, the United States Supreme Court announced that it will not hear Karen Reid's appeal on grounds of double jeopardy. 28th of April, a half-day of witness testimony focused on Jen McCabe's How Long to Die in Cold Google search and John O'Keefe's movements the night of his death. The defence crash reconstruction experts were then questioned without the jury present. 29th of April, key witness Jen McCabe began her testimony. McCabe explained that O'Keefe was a very good friend of hers, that she could call for anything. McCabe got to the Waterfall Bar and Grill in Canton around 9 p.m. on January the 28th, 2022, eating and drinking with members of her family. She said the group was joined a short time later by Brian Albert and Brian Higgins, two men who Reid's attorneys planned to say, as part of their third-party culprit defence, could be responsible for O'Keefe's death. Reid and O'Keefe later joined the group at Waterfall. McCabe said it was just a typical average night. Just after midnight on January the 29th, McCabe said she left the Waterfall with her husband Matt. She said she spoke to Reid and O'Keefe. According to McCabe, Reid and O'Keefe planned to join her at Brian and Nicole Albert's home on Fairview Road, along with Higgins and Caitlin Albert. McCabe said that she and her husband arrived at 34 Fairview Road and several people were already there, including her niece, nephew and Julie Nagel. The group was celebrating McCabe's nephew, Brian Albert Jr.'s birthday. When she arrived, McCabe testified that she sat down with them. They were listening to music, laughing and telling stories. She said someone in the group played the music video for It's Raining Men, which has significance as an ongoing family joke. McCabe said that she looked outside several times, expecting O'Keefe and Reid to arrive. She said she saw a dark-coloured SUV out front. Reeve drove a black Lexus SUV. I believe it was Karen's, McCabe said. She added that she only took quick glances, but McCabe said she saw the SUV first straight in front of the front door, then in front of the flagpole, and a third time further up from the flagpole. McCabe texted O'Keefe, "Here?" and "Pull behind me," but he never answered. I was expecting John and Karen to come into the house, McCabe said. Brennan asked if Reed and O'Keefe ever came inside. McCabe said no. McCabe said she left the house around 1:45 a.m. with her husband driving. Nagel and Sarah Levinson, who were also at the party, were also in the car. McCabe said she was in the front passenger seat as they passed the flagpole, but she was looking back and talking to Nagel and Levinson, who were in the back seat. Just before 5 a.m., McCabe said O'Keefe's niece called her and she could hear Reed screaming in the background. McCabe said that during another telephone call, she told Reed she had seen her and O'Keefe outside Brian Albert's home. She told me she didn't remember being there. Then she started saying, "Could I have hit him? Did I hit him?" McCabe said, adding that Reed then told her she had cracked her tail light. McCabe, Kerry Roberts and Reed met at O'Keefe's house, then left from there together to search for O'Keefe. Roberts was driving. McCabe was in the front passenger seat and Reed was in the back seat. According to McCabe, at one point in the driveway of O'Keefe's home, Reed pointed out the broken tail light to her and Roberts. McCabe said Roberts pointed out a piece that was sticking out and was worried someone would catch their coat on it. Ms. Reed was pretty adamant that we went to Fairview first, McCabe said. McCabe's testimony, she recalled the morning that she, Reed and Kerry Roberts found O'Keefe's body in the snow outside the home. McCabe said that as the women pulled up at the home, she looked towards the area of the flagpole, but she couldn't see anything due to the snowfall. When she got closer, McCabe said she saw Roberts removing the snow from O'Keefe's face. "I was frozen. I was shocked. I couldn't believe it was him lying there," McCabe said. Outside court, Reed said no comment when asked if she noticed a change in McCabe's demeanour compared to the first trial. It was then the case that Whiffin, who worked for Celebrite, a company that did forensic phone extractions, Whiffin testified about the timing of key witness McCabe's Google search about how long it would take someone to die in the cold, saying it happened after 6 a.m. on January 29, 2022. Defence attorneys have said McCabe made the search at 2:27 a.m., hours before O'Keefe's body was found. According to Whiffin, the search registered at 2:27 a.m. because McCabe opened an internet browser tab, then hours later used the same tab for the search, she said, was made at Reed's request. On cross-examination, Alessi said that during the first trial, one of the tools Celebrite used did show 2:27 a.m. as the time McCabe searched how long to die in the cold, but it was later deleted. Alessi said that a Celebrite competitor found the same and still has it in its record, while Celebrite removed this time stamp. It was changed due to the research I did, and it was verified by the forensic team, Whiffin said. He was asked by Brennan on redirect, "Did you go into your company's software and change it to accommodate law enforcement?" Whiffin said no, and Brennan asked him why he wouldn't do that. Aside from being unethical to change the data in that way, this is an artifact that is easily validated by any examiner. If I was to tamper it for the purpose of changing the outcome of a case, it would be detected by all our customers immediately and would destroy the reputation of Celebrite, which I have no intention of doing, Whiffin said in his testimony. McCabe was subjected to tense cross-examination, and then 5th of May, Canton firefighter, paramedic Katie McLaughlin testified that she heard Reed repeatedly say, "I hit him," after O'Keefe's body was found. Retired Canton Police Lieutenant Paul Gallagher testifies about responding to the scene using a leaf blower to move snow. May the 6th, several witnesses took the stand on the 10th day of testimony, and jurors heard several angry voicemails that Karen Reed left for John O'Keefe in the early morning hours of January the 29th. Massachusetts State Police Trooper Nicholas Guarino was called to the stand, and he presented evidence extracted from cell phones belonging to O'Keefe and Reed. The voicemail said, "John, I fucking hate you," in a voicemail at 12:37 a.m. According to Guarino, Reed's cell phone connected to the internet at O'Keefe's home at 12:36 a.m. on January the 29th. "John, I'm here with your fucking kids and nobody knows where the fuck you are, you fucking pervert," Reed says, referring to his niece and nephew. "You're fucking another girl. You're a fucking loser. Fuck yourself," Reed shouts in another voicemail. In total, Reed called O'Keefe 52 times in the overnight hours records show. She left him 8 voicemails. The 8th voicemail came at 6:03 a.m. as Reed, Jennifer McCabe and Kerry Roberts found O'Keefe in the snow outside 34 Fairfield Road in Canton. The line remains open and commotion can be heard in the background. The fact is that this succession of voicemail messages and calls might be as a consequence of an individual being worried about the whereabouts of her partner, or it might be as a consequence of a nullification of threat to control posed by the absence of the individual, who is the intimate partner primary source, or could also be the behaviour of an individual that is seeking to set up some kind of suggestion that she didn't know where he was when she actually did, and it was perverting the course of justice. Either way, the fact that an individual made 52 calls in the course of a few hours is clearly excessive. It might be that this is an aberration as a consequence of an external stressor, namely concern and worry about the absence of an individual, or it might be representative of the response to a potential threat to control in relation to where the individual might be. Thereafter, there were further witnesses that then appeared in respect of reading text messages that had taken place between Reed The text messages were between Reed and Brian Higgins. Brian Higgins is a Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms and Explosives agent. And the defence has argued that he could be the one who's responsible for O'Keefe's death. In the first trial, Higgins read aloud flirty text messages that he had exchanged with Karen Reed. In one text message from January of 2022, Reed tells Higgins, "You're hot." Bear in mind she's in a relationship with O'Keefe at this juncture. Now, of course, there's a world apart from a flirtatious text message and murdering somebody. But nevertheless, the fact that she was engaging in flirtatious behaviour with someone whilst in a relationship with another person tends to support her sense of entitlement and shows a lack of boundary recognition. Higgins responds, "Are you serious or messing with me?" "No, I'm serious," Reed says. In another message, Reed texts Higgins, "Come over to my house." Higgins later tells Reed he assumed you were happy with the situation. She replies, "I was, but things have deteriorated." Higgins then asks if Reed was breaking up with her boyfriend or staying together. "I don't know. He hooked up with another girl on vacation," Reed said. "I'm very close to his niece. It's a very fucked up relationship." The state of Reed's relationship with O'Keefe came up repeatedly in the court hearing, with Reed saying, "John and I have had lots of ups and downs." This is potentially indicative of the tempestuous nature of a relationship that involves at least one narcissist. Then Reed says O'Keefe showed her a ring video of her with Higgins and accused them of hooking up. Higgins and Reed had shared a kiss a couple of weeks before O'Keefe died. "This is an act of infidelity. You legit planted one on me," Higgins said. On January the 19th, 2022, the texts indicate that Reed went to Higgins' house in West Roxbury. The last text read out was Reed telling Higgins John died. The witness was asked how he would characterise the texts between Reed and Higgins, and he stated his opinion that it was an angry girlfriend trying to set up a hookup to hurt her boyfriend. Was this the case that he had been messing around, and this had resulted in a diminution of emotional empathy for Karen Reid, so she retaliated by flirting and kissing another man? Or was it the case that her boyfriend had been with somebody else and that threatened her need for control, resulting in her triangulating him with another man, cheating and engaging in flirtatious exchanges? Or might it have even been the case that there was no such interaction between her boyfriend and another woman, and this was the paranoid justification of her narcissism to cause her to engage in the flirtation and hookup with another individual? During mid-May, various forensic scientists and medical examiners provided testimony along with accident reconstruction experts. Digital forensic experts who specialize in car data and crash reconstruction were also called and cross-examined. On 3rd of June, during a second day of questioning of dog bite expert Dr. Marie Russell, the defence called for a mistrial with prejudice, but this was denied. A Dighton police officer also testified about he remembered seeing damage to Reid's tail light compared to how it is pictured hours later in the Canton Police Department garage. June the 4th, snowplough driver Brian Lorahan testified about not seeing a body on Fairview Road in Canton on the night O Keefe died. Lothram was cross-examined about how Aidan Turtleboy Kearney's coverage could have influenced his testimony. A crash reconstructionist for engineering consulting firm appeared on the 6th of June. June the 9th, the defence requested a mistrial and it was denied. Attorneys had accused the prosecution of a stunt when Hank Brennan asked Wolfe about holes in O'Keefe's sweatshirt and if they could have been caused by a fall backwards. Brennan later admitted he made a mistake, and the judge later gave jurors an instruction that the holes were caused by a criminologist. On June 11th, Karen Reid's defence rested its case, and on June the 12th, it was the final hearing before closing arguments was held, as attorneys and the judge met without jurors present. The defence said it would not be pursuing a third-party culprit argument against Brian Albert and Brian Higgins, but would be focusing on the lack of a police investigation into Higgins. June the 13th, both sides presented dramatically different closing arguments. As one would expect, the position of defence and prosecution was entirely different. The defence attorney stated that there was no collision in the death of John O'Keefe. He stated, "This case was corrupted from the start. It was corrupted by a legal investigator whose misconduct infected every single part of this case from the top to the bottom," which is him alluding to fired Massachusetts State Police Trooper Michael Proctor, who led the initial investigation in the case. Proctor did not testify in the trial. If the Massachusetts State Police can't trust him, how can you trust him? With this investigation, with your verdict, and with Karen Reid's life, Jackson said. The lead investigator in a murder trial was never called to testify. Think about that. That should stop you in your tracks. Wouldn't you want to hear from Michael Proctor? Wouldn't you want to hear from the lead investigator in the case? Their investigator was corrupted from the start by bias and personal loyalties. Not a single medical expert called by the defence or called by the Commonwealth has testified that John was hit by a car. Not one. Think about the irony. Not one. It's not just significant, it's literally the most important point in the entire trial. Remember Mr. Brennan, the prosecutor's opening statement. He made some promises to you. He said this case is about the data. They've had 3.5 years to get this right. The Commonwealth has had this case for 3.5 years to get it right. And he explained there was plenty of evidence that O'Keefe died in a fight. He stated there was no evidence that John O'Keefe was hit by a car. This is a central fact in the case. The only fact that matters is literally uncontested by every medical expert. Uncontested, undisputed. There is no evidence that John was hit by a car. None. How much more reasonable doubt could there be? You have a man lying dead in the yard, and here are the undisputed facts that those officers were confronted with. Black eyes, obviously black eyes are consistent with a fight. Bloody nose, also consistent with a fight. Bleeding from the face, consistent with a physical altercation. A cut over the right eye, consistent with a punch. No coat in the freezing cold. Not dressed for outside, dressed for inside, and one shoe on. I wonder where the other shoe could be. I don't know. Maybe in the house 30 feet away. And then you find a broken and shattered drinking glass next to him. The type of glass you might find, I don't know, let me think about this, in a kitchen, in a house 30 feet away. He told the jury that investigators never searched the house and that prosecutors failed to prove Reed was driving drunk that night. Asked for testimony that Reed said, "I hit him," when she found O'Keefe the next morning, Jackson said that she said, "Could I have hit him? Did I hit him? It wasn't a confession. It was confusion." "We're after the truth in this courtroom. You're entitled to it. Demand it," Jackson said. "Let your voice be heard, not in whispers, but in truth. Let the community feel through your verdict that justice cannot be bent and that it will not be buried. Find Karen guilty, not guilty, not guilty, not guilty." Prosecutor Hank Brennan addressed the jury, saying twice about Reed, she was drunk, she hit him, then she left him to die. Now, the government doesn't have to prove that she was drunk. It's either she's over the legal limit or she had enough alcohol to affect her ability to operate a motor vehicle safely. You will know she was far beyond the legal limit. After the retrograde analysis, almost 2 to 3 times the legal limit. He played a clip from one of her TV interviews where she said, "I shouldn't have been driving." Brennan emphasised that O'Keefe and Reed's relationship was not healthy and was nearing its end. Text messages from before the party were read. O'Keefe texted Reed that he was sick of always arguing and fighting. "The relationship is almost over. The tensions are simmering beneath the surface. They are not getting along. She believes Mr. O'Keefe is already halfway out of the relationship. He's not into it anymore. You saw them. This relationship was unstable and at its end. So fast forward this night, after the discord, after the arguing, they go out. And what do? They drink, and they drink a lot." He then focused on the moments when O'Keefe got out of Reed's SUV that night after a tense ride from the Waterfall bar. "It's the first time he's moved since they've got to the flagpole, and it'll be the last time he moves in his life. He's separate from her. He's safe." And then she makes a decision. This is what this case is about. Then she makes a decision. She could have driven him home. She could have broken up with him. They could have talked about it the next day. But like knocking on the door, like John O'Keefe's niece said, getting in the last word, she doesn't drive away. She takes that £6,000 Lexus and she makes a decision. And that decision is that she steps on the gas after banging it into reverse. It sounds ominous, a second-degree murder charge. It's a serious charge, second-degree murder. When most people think murder, they think shooting or stabbing somebody. It's natural to think that. Second-degree murder is different. It's not first-degree murder. I told you at the beginning of this case, I told you that we were not going to suggest or try to prove that Ms. Reed intended to kill John O'Keefe. That was never part of this case. We're not claiming that. I told you we're not even going to prove that she even intended to hit him. We never suggested we would try to prove that. We are not trying to prove that she intended to hit him. We're not. What we're obligated to prove, and what we have proven from the evidence in this case of second-degree murder, is that she intended an act, and that is putting the car in reverse and heading back towards John O'Keefe. She intended that act. When Miss Reed hits John O'Keefe, collides with John O'Keefe, we don't know if he went in the air a foot. We don't know how much of a clip it was. We don't know if he stumbled back, but we know there's a collision. There's no doubt there's a collision because her tail light is all over the yard. There was an eyewitness, there was a guide, and that eyewitness tells us what she knew, and that eyewitness is Karen Reed herself. She tells you that she knew. "Could I have hit him? Did I hit him?" Reed said in the video. "I didn't think I hit him, but could I have clipped him?" He's not at a party. He's not wrestling Brian Higgins. He's not in a fight. If he's in a fight, his cell phone would be moving. There would be healthcare data. There'd be steps. If he got into the house in 20 seconds and his cell phone is found under his body the next day, then how did he get back outside? There would be more steps because his phone is working. The data is the data. There's nothing wrong with it. It's registering everything. Brennan said his phone never moves again. He explained that it wasn't necessary to call Trooper Proctor. We didn't need him. We didn't need him to prove this case beyond a reasonable doubt. He explained that O'Keefe is not an it. John O'Keefe is not a body. He's not a buffalo on a prairie. John O'Keefe was a person, and he was murdered by Karen Reid. Those were the closing arguments of prosecution and defence. On June the 16th, jurors had their first day of deliberation but didn't reach a verdict. June the 17th, on the second full day, the Karen Reid jury came back with 4 questions for the judge. One of them sought clarity on what happens if they agree to not guilty on 2 charges but hung on the 3rd charge. Jurors later were dismissed for the 3rd day without a verdict. June 18th, in their 4th day of deliberations, jurors acquitted Reid of second-degree murder manslaughter while operating under the influence and leaving the scene of an accident resulting in death. She was convicted of driving under the influence of alcohol. Judge can only sentence Reid to 1 year probation. June the 18th, several key prosecution witnesses who were friends with the O'Keefe family issued a statement calling the verdict a devastating miscarriage of justice. June 19th, Massachusetts State Police Colonel Jeffrey Noble said in a statement that in the aftermath of the Karen Reid case, the department will continue to work on improvements in oversight and accountability. June the 19th, District Attorney Michael Morrissey issued a statement saying to WZ-TV only, "The jury has spoken." June 23rd, Special Prosecutor Hank Brennan issues his first statement since the trial ended. He stated he was disappointed in the verdict and condemned witness abuse. Now, I've taken a considerable amount of time to go through all of that material to help you understand some of the issues that were part of this trial, and also to provide you with information that helps us understand more about the personality of Karen Reid. There are many people that support her and believe that she's the victim of an attempt to frame her. Similarly, there are many people that believe that she did kill O'Keefe and has been wrongly acquitted. There has been a polarised reaction which reflects the high profile and contentious nature of this case. Hundreds of Karen Reid supporters, many wearing pink, her favourite colour, and carrying Free Karen Reid signs, erupted in cheers outside Norfolk Superior Court in Dedham on June the 18th when the not guilty verdict was announced. The crowd chanted "Karen is free" and fired pink confetti cannons, with some supporters using the American Sign Language gesture for "I love you," which Reid and her legal team reciprocated. Reid's family expressed profound relief. Her brother, Nathan Reid, told WCVB that the verdict was the greatest possible news for their aging parents. Supporters who had raised over $1 million for her legal fund saw the acquittal as validation of their belief in her innocence and claims of a police cover-up. On platforms like X, supporters and figures like @Dr. Turtleboy celebrated the verdict, emphasising Reid's factual innocence and criticising the prosecution's case as flawed or rigged. Some viewed the acquittal as triumph over a corrupt system. Those close to John O'Keefe, including his family and friends, called the verdict a devastating miscarriage of justice. A statement from the Albert, McCabe and Roberts families, who were linked to the case, mourned O'Keefe and condemned the lies and conspiracy theories spread by Reid's defence and media. Some ex-users labelled the acquittal a travesty, arguing that it was bought with money, spin and lies despite overwhelming evidence. They felt the truth was overshadowed by privilege and manipulation. Both supporters and critics agreed the police investigation was deeply flawed. Legal experts, such as Northeastern University professor Daniel Medwed, noted the defence effectively poked holes in the prosecution's case, generating reasonable doubt due to issues like unethical conduct by lead investigator Michael Proctor, who was fired for sending offensive texts about Reid. Criminal defence attorney Eric Faddis called the acquittal a black eye for the government, citing a sloppy investigation that raised questions about evidence integrity. Analysts like former litigator Lisa Bonner credited the defence's vigorous cross-examination and focus on police misconduct for the acquittal. Jurors who spoke out highlighted the investigation's shortcomings, with some citing mishandled evidence, for example, blood samples in red Solo cups and mislabelled bags. Canton Select Board Chair John McCourt acknowledged the town was deeply affected by the case. noting the verdict brought relief to some but raised questions for others. The case's media coverage, amplified by TikTok, Reddit, for instance, the Justice for Karen Reid subreddit with nearly 20,000 members, documentaries and podcasts, fueled public fascination. Experts like Eric Schiffer noted the case's dopamine triggers, small-town cops, alleged cover-up, influencer sleuths, drove its viral appeal. Despite the acquittal, no one has been held accountable for O'Keefe's death, prompting Reid's attorney, David Yannetti, to suggest somebody's still out there. The defence claims of a cover-up, though not fully argued in court due to strategic limitations, continue to spark debate. Reid still faces a civil lawsuit over Keith's death, indicating her legal battles are not over. Cameron Reid's acquittal elicited ecstatic support from her followers, who saw it as justice against a flawed system, while O'Keefe's allies and some observers decried it as a failure of accountability. Legal experts largely attributed the outcome to a weak prosecution case marred by investigative missteps. But the case's unresolved questions and cultural impact continue to fuel debate and discussion. So I provided you with this detailed background in case you're not familiar with the case, or by virtue of a recap for those of you that may have been following and may well have formed your own views as to what you believe the outcome ought to have been. You may believe the acquittal is correct. You may believe that the acquittal amounts to a miscarriage of justice. Well, where does this all leave Karen Reid? She has been acquitted. It may well be the case that she is an innocent individual. After all, that is what the jury has found. She could be a non-narcissist that has been the victim of a conspiracy. Alternatively, she could be a narcissist that has similarly been the victim of a conspiracy, or she might be a narcissist who has managed to manipulate the situation, and there was no conspiracy, her narcissism causing her to maintain that that was the case, in order to bring about her acquittal. It is the case that she could be entirely innocent whilst also being a narcissist, or she could be someone that's simply narcissistic, a normal, or even empathic. Having heard much of the progress of the case and key aspects of it, we consider whether she is an empath, a normal, narcissistic, or a narcissist. The fact is that with regard to her professional career, she was born around 1979 and is a financial analyst and adjunct professor at Bentley University. She holds a master's degree in finance and has worked as an equity analyst with a decade-long tenure at Fidelity Investments and as a chartered financial analyst instructor. Her professional roles indicate competence in high-stakes analytical environments requiring technical expertise and teaching skills. Naturally, her career was overshadowed by her 2022 arrest, and this led to her suspension from Bentley University pending the trial's outcome. Now, there's no evidence that Reid's ever exaggerated her professional achievements. Her roles at Fidelity and Bentley align with her qualifications. There's no inflation of credentials. Her teaching and CFA instruction roles suggest a desire to share expertise, but there's no reports of her wanting excessive attention, for instance, fuel, in professional settings. There's no professional controversies, for instance, mistreating colleagues. None of that's documented, unlike the interpersonal allegations in her personal life, which I will come to. Her ability to maintain long-term employment at Fidelity suggests functional workplace relationships. But as you know, with some narcissists, they are able to do so, maintaining functional workplace relationships whilst other aspects of their behaviour are problematic, particularly in relation to familial and intimate relationships. With regard to intimate relationships, Reid dated Boston police officer John O Keefe for about 2 years, and they lived together. Their relationship was turbulent. It was marked by arguments and conflict, as per the trial evidence that you've heard. Such a turbulent environment points to the likelihood, although not definitively, of the presence of at least one narcissist. Might it be the case that O'Keefe was the narcissist and was abusing her and she was a victim that responded? It's possible. Or it might be that she was the abuser. Note that her voicemails were rage-filled, which point to the presence of potentially ignited fury. She accused O'Keefe of infidelity, although we had no evidence as to whether that was actually the case, and therefore that could be a false accusation born out of paranoia. She showed volatility in the relationship. It was alleged that she struck O'Keefe with her SUV and left him to die. Certainly, if that was the case, that would demonstrate a desire to assert control as a consequence of physical injury and a callousness and lack of empathy, leaving him to die in the cold. However, because that evidence was not accepted by a jury, we can't include that in the analysis, and we must reject it. Nevertheless, she was rumoured also to have an intimate relationship with her married attorney, Alan Jackson, which, if correct, would mean that she was interfering in somebody else's relationship with no due emotional empathy for the affected spouse of Alan Jackson. There had been speculation about failed friendships and relationships, but no specific ex-partners or patterns are documented in that. Although she was able to sustain a 2-year relationship with O'Keefe, the fact is that was a turbulent and volatile relationship, and the ability to maintain a relationship for that period of time would not suggest any form of relational stability. There's no evidence to suggest that Reed viewed herself as superior in the relationships, though her trial narrative of being framed could reflect a degree of self-justification. Reed's relationship with O'Keefe, who was a respected officer, could be seen as bolstering self-esteem, and it might be the case that she sought his status for validation. Furthermore, the alleged attorney affair may well also be attention-seeking. Her voicemails and the content of them demonstrates a diminution at the least and possible lack of emotional empathy. This is devaluing behaviour, and the rage that she exhibited could well be demonstrative of ignited fury. She maintains innocence and demonstrates distress, but of course a maintenance of innocence may well just be done for the nullification of a threat to control, and furthermore, the appearance of distress could simply be a pity play that's utilised. It isn't always the case that a narcissist will present with an entirely confident demeanour. As you know, those mid-range narcissists will regularly portray themselves as the victim, will turn on the waterworks and portray themselves as being distressed. There does appear to be potentially manipulative narratives whereby she has blamed others for the death of O'Keefe, whilst, of course, they were not on trial. There hasn't been any cohesive evidence presented to demonstrate that that was what would actually occurred. It's also suggested that she orchestrated a mob via the blogger Turtle Boy, and in such circumstances, that does appear to be manipulative behaviour. Her voicemails exhibit heated, ignited fury at perceived slights, for instance, O'Keefe's infidelity, and this is demonstrative of the hypersensitivity of the narcissist. She reacts aggressively to rejection, which is potentially relevant to her alleged violence towards O'Keefe thereafter. Her intimate relationships as a whole are not documented other than the one with O'Keefe, which was clearly repeatedly turbulent and certainly gives the impression of the tempestuous nature that takes place between narcissist and victim. Furthermore, There is the allegation that she was involved in an affair with her attorney, which again is demonstrative of the potential need to assert control, to draw fuel, a lack of regard for boundary recognition, and an absence of emotional empathy for those affected by that. With regard to her familial relationships, little's known about her family dynamics, but her parents did support her during the trial. They attended court and managed her bail. There's no reports of estrangement or abuse. There's no evidence that she's mistreated family members. The familial support could suggest functional ties, or, of course, the presentation of a facade with regard to family, whereby the poor behaviour of Reed would be directed towards intimate partners, whereas she maintains a facade in respect of family and friends because she deals with them far less often, meaning they are far less likely to threaten the need for control and furthermore serve a purpose with regard to facade management, meaning that the narcissist is far less likely to then lash out as against these members of the coterie. Her behaviour in the intimate relationship shows lack of empathy. It also shows manipulative behaviour. Her sensitivity to criticism aligns with narcissistic hypersensitivity. The fact that she was intoxicated and drove whilst intoxicated shows a sense of entitlement and also a lack of accountability. Reed also had a history of drinking, including driving under the influence, and therefore these repetitive legal issues and disregard for norms are commensurate with a sense of entitlement and a rejection of accountability. Her rage and reckless driving also fit with an absence of accountability. Reed's association with Turtle Boy, who harassed O'Keefe's family and witnesses, is seen as manipulative, whereby Turtle Boy could potentially be utilised as a lieutenant. Her defence denies orchestrating harassment, claiming that Turtle Boy acted independently. Nevertheless, there does appear to be evidence that supports that this was some form of manipulation, and again, causing this individual to embark on a campaign on her behalf with potential witness harassment and intimidation shows a sense of entitlement, the need to assert control, to nullify threats to control, and, furthermore, an absence of emotional empathy. Her supporters, rallied by Turtle Boy, viewed her as a victim of a police conspiracy, and they protested at the courthouse. This support could reflect a need for admiration, and that there's personal adulation, or might it simply be issue-driven support? There have been instances of her shifting the narrative, blaming others, and as a consequence of that, this would accord with a lack of accountability and a revision of history. That the inconsistency of her stories and blaming innocence fits with the revision of history and blame shifting, commensurate with the necessity of control. That these align with a lack of emotional empathy by blaming others, manipulativeness with the need for narrative control, and again the sensitivity to criticism. It doesn't appear to be the case that Reed exhibits much in the way of grandiosity. She doesn't exaggerate her importance or achievements. Her professional competence and trial narrative focus on victimhood rather than superiority. But as you know, certain narcissists don't necessarily go down the superior route, but rather rely upon victimhood. Her courthouse supporters and the Turtle Boy campaign could reflect the necessity of fuel. Her media interviews also may well be indicative of the need for validation and fuel. Lack of emotional empathy. There is the alleged violence against O'Keefe, but she's been acquitted of that. But the harassment of the family suggests a disregard for their well-being, and the behaviours of having an affair and also the way that she treated O'Keefe in the relationship also support a repeated absence of emotional empathy. She faced repeated accusations of blaming others, orchestrating harassment, shifting narratives, all of which align with manipulation. Her rage-filled voicemails and trial behaviour, for instance, rudeness to the judge, all suggest a hypersensitivity to threats to control, that she perceives particular threats and acts in a haughty and dismissive fashion. It's evident that ultimately, as a consequence of the behaviours that were exhibited throughout her trial, the behaviours that evidence has been provided in relation to, that Karen Read is an individual that acts with a sense of entitlement, that she issues orders, that she expects other people to respond to her needs and to anticipate them. She's demonstrated repeatedly an absence of emotional empathy with regard to the way that she had treated O Keefe, but I exclude from this the allegation of her murdering him and leaving him to die in the cold, because that was not accepted by the jury. But irrespective of that, the content of her voicemails and text messages suggests an individual that was rendering false accusations, exhibiting insulting comments, flirtation with another police officer, a federal agent rather, the suggestion of an affair with her attorney, all point to an absence of emotional empathy for other people. She demonstrated repeated lack of accountability, with the blame shifting, the suggestion of a conspiracy, the failure with regard to showing accountability for her driving whilst under the influence. She demonstrates haughtiness and dismissiveness. She was shown to be rude during the trial, for instance, with regard that she behaved towards the judge. She shows herself to be arrogant and high-handed. There appears to be a requirement for fuel with regard to the admiration of her supporters. There's various manipulations demonstrated in order to nullify the threat to control and to maintain control. That she engaged in insult, smearing, triangulation by object, triangulation by person. That there was intimidation, deflection, denial, provocation, projection. And therefore, irrespective of the outcome, which it may well be the case that she is innocent and did not kill John O'Keefe, irrespective of that, the evidence that has accumulated in this instance supports the finding that Karen Read is in fact a narcissist, an individual who has an innate need for control, that responds to threats to control with heated, ignited fury, who behaves in an entitled fashion, exhibits a lack of accountability, an absence of emotional empathy, a pattern of manipulative behaviours, various aspects of the narcissistic dynamic, an absence of boundary recognition, and ultimately behaves in a way which is commensurate with the finding of a narcissist. I'm H.G. Tudor. Thank you for listening.